I'm going to talk about CPY on the pedestal. And we bought CPY in 1960, Dawn and I did, with her dad's money, and which we eventually paid him back. But we brought it north in, let me see, in 1960 we bought CPY, brought it north, and started flying out of Dawson City, mainly to Old Crow and places like that. I had come from the airline and was quite rigid in the rules of the airline, and I didn't overload, and tried to fly the airplane by what I called white man's rules, and promptly got myself into trouble. When you're flying in the south, you've got ILS airports all over the place, and alternates and places to go if you get into trouble. When you're flying in the north, you've got no help at all. You better just be very aware of where you're going and that sort of thing. And one of my first trips was to Old Crow, so I gave the fuel load to the engineer, Larry Cameron, who was going with us on that trip. And I said, well, I want fuel on the airplane to go from Dawson to Old Crow, back to Dawson in 45 minutes. So he said, okay, so he goes off to put the load on, the fuel load. And we take off, and it's a clear day, and I had gone into Army Signal Corps to get an area forecast and a route forecast, and was met by the retort, Jesus, Bartsch, every time you go flying, it's a major production, because they had to get all of my weather on the Morse code. There was no landline into Dawson at the time, so I thought, well, it's a clear day, what the heck, and we'll only be gone 4 hours, so away we go. Now we enter some cloud on the way up. The Ogilvie Mountains are about 8,000 feet running east-west north of Dawson, so you have to climb up and you go over. We got in cloud. By the time we got our estimate into Old Crow, we were still in cloud. We turn around and come back, and we're now picking up ice. And I thought, oh boy. And then I called ahead to Dawson. They had a radio that you had to be within 25 miles before you could talk to them. And I told him where we were, and I said, how's your weather? Because I was still, and he said, we're obscured ceiling and 2 miles in heavy snow. I said, boy, this is going to be a short, fast career, because I didn't have enough fuel to go anywhere. And we were talking, we didn't have the headsets on, we used the speaker in the airplane, and Larry Cameron was standing between us, and he taps me on the shoulder and he said, I put 35 gallons in the back tank, unbeknownst to me. And I kissed him and I was damn happy. So we get over Dawson, and I said, when did this come in? And they said about 20 minutes ago, and it came in from the east. So we turned on a heading that took us over the Yukon and descended down, and eventually found the river, turned around and came back, and crawled over Dawson at about 200 feet in a half a mile in snow, groped our way back to the airport and landed, and ran out of gas. So that was, we got home on Larry's gas, and he never let me forget that either. So one thing I learned about flying in the north is put an extra hour of fuel in the back tank, and it became known as grandma gas, and it had no weight. So that, to kind of support our theory, Don and I sat in Norman Wells watching the DOT's DC-3. It had 4 tanks, we had 3. They filled all 4 tanks, put on 20 people. They were at least 1,500 pounds overloaded by our calculation. And I thought, those are the guys that make the rules, but are smart enough not to obey them in the north. And CPY was such a grand airplane to fly. It was forgiving. I guess like if you buy a Monday morning car, you get a clunker, a Wednesday car is better, and a Friday car might be okay. CPY was just kind of the perfect airplane. When they put it together, the wings went on with the right angle. It was faster than the average DC-3. And we had another airplane was a clunker, and it was 10 miles an hour slower than CPY. So we learned to appreciate CPY's flying abilities. And she looked after us. There was one time we took the young people. We were talking about Father Mouchet, or Bonnie was.
You have water right there if you need.
Oh, thank you. And Father Mouchet, in Old Crow, and maybe I'm telling stories out of turn, but he didn't get there first, so all of the natives in Old Crow were, they didn't belong to his church. He had the RCMP, and that was about his total congregation. But he taught all the kids to ski. And we took them down to Anchorage over New Year's, 2 years in a row. And coming back on one of the trips, we crossed the Richardsons and we were just ready to pull the throttles back a little bit and start our descent into Inuvik. And we hit a bunch of ice. And we didn't have to touch the throttles. We just started down at 500 feet a minute, and it was all working out fine. We never touched the power. We were putting ice on. We talked to PWA that were just leaving, and conditions at Inuvik were fine. When we broke out, we could see the runway ahead. And we were approaching, and we knew we were heavy. We didn't touch the power until we were over the runway at maybe 20 feet high. And I just started to bring the nose up to stop our rate of descent. Just cracked the power, and CPY quit flying. We dropped about 30 feet, and I wasn't fast enough for Dawn. She had full power on, just right now. We fell, and CPY decided to start to fly just as the wheels kissed the runway, and we had the smoothest, nicest landing that no one knew how much trouble we were in. We bought CPY in 1960 for $65,000, and then had to put a new engine on it, and then find a place at Old Crow that we could land. So we had to develop our sandbar landings, and the book says when you want to land on a short landing, you come in and you drag it in on the prop with lots of power, and when you cut the power, you quit flying and you're on the ground. Well, I tried that once, and that wasn't the best idea. So after that, what we did was make a steeper approach and flare the airplane short of where you want to touch the wheels. That would burn off your speed, and you got pretty good at it. You could put those wheels within 5 feet of where you really wanted most of the time anyway. Is there any questions about CPY or flying in the north that anyone has? Oh, there's one in the back.
Can you tell me about CPY's history in India?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Can you tell about CPY's history in India?
Oh, no, I don't have any information on CPY, and the logbooks didn't keep up with the airplane. When we bought the airplane from CPA, they had a good history and a stack of logbooks like this. but there was nothing on her early history. I know she was in India, but that's all I know about CPY's overseas adventures. So any other questions?
Well, I was just gonna ask you, when you brought it, was it new? And I found out that it was not.
No, it was built in 1943.
Okay.
And it operated with CP for 15 years or better. And then we bought it for $65,000, put another engine on it, came north and started learning how to fly on sandbars and the river ice in the winter. But it was a very forgiving airplane, and just a beautiful airplane to fly. It was, like I said, it was at least 5 miles an hour faster than any other DC-3 that we had, and it looked after us with ice. So it's just a great airplane, and we love coming up here, and it brings back so many memories for Don and I when we come up and look at it and then start reminiscing about CPY and how it kept us out of trouble. So,
We all love it too.
How did it get on the pedestal?
pardon?
What was the process of putting it on the pedestal? How did it actually end up there?
When we had a company called Great Northern Airways, and we stopped operating, and CPY was shoved off in the bushes, sort of thing. And at one point, the fire department were going to do training, fire aircraft, and light it on fire and that sort of stuff. And Bob Muff, a local man here that was an engineer, he decided that he wasn't going to let that happen, and he jumped in the middle of the whole thing and salvaged the airplane, got it given to him by the owner at that time, which was Northward Aviation, and then donated it to the museum with the idea of putting it on a display here. And I think Ed Jacobs came up with the idea of on the pedestal, and went ahead and Douglas engineer says, oh, you can't do it, and an aeronautical engineer says, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, don't tell a Yukoner you can't do something. And so it ended up on the pedestal, and it's just, it's world famous now, the airplane. So, Chris?
I have a comment. I know for a fact it wasn't given to him, because Mr. Mott told me that he had to pay $1 for it.
Yeah, he did. He paid $1 from Northward Aviation, got title to the airplane, and donated it to the museum. So that's how that got salvaged.
I'm kind of interested in the conversation that ended. Let's buy a DC-3 and go to Dawson.
The which?
How did you decide to do that?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
How did you decide to buy a DC-3 and fly out of Dawson?
I came up to visit Dawn. She was flying out of Dawson City, had a charter operation, Conley Dawson Airways out of Dawson City. And I came up to visit with her, and we decided that exploration was just starting, both oil and mineral exploration north of Dawson, which was the end of the road. And we thought, there's room for DC-3 and supply, and Eric Nielsen had also at that point, Old Crow got its mail from 40 Mile, and he started a mail service and opened a post office in Old Crow. And with the money that we got, 25 cents a pound for taking mail in, supported a 180 that we developed into a weekly trip, and that grew from there, really. And then we had the airplane here, and an airplane crashed near Dawson, and Field Aviation said, can you take a load of people in? And I said, yeah, we had noticed a sandbar at Old Crow, and we hadn't done any sandbar landings at this point. But we said, yeah, we can take a crew in, and which we did. We had to go to Nuvik, pick them up, and take them to Old Crow. And that was our first arrival on a sandbar. After that, we got a lot better at sandbar landings. But we really developed an approach which was a steep approach with throttles back, and then you could flare short of where you wanted to touch, and then you were on the ground. And well, Don could do an 800 foot, you know, from touch to stop in 800 feet. You were better than I was. But any other questions?
When Marlon was introducing you, she said that there was more than one meaning to your book title. What is the other meaning?
Oh, well, yeah, Lady on a Pedestal is obviously the airplane, but the young lady who flew it. So, and she's a pretty good pilot, too.